Hi, so I'm Ben Clark. I'm the Director of Future Worlds, the Startup Accelerator here at the University of Southampton.
Hi, I'm Iles. I'm the Tech Acceleration Manager at Future Worlds. So we're 3 weeks into term now. All the freshers have been coming in. We're doing a lot of welcome talks. I think everyone's very excited about their new start. I think we've had a lot of interest in people trying to form startups. I guess, why do you think university is such a good place to start their startup journey?
I guess that's part of it, isn't it? It's welcome week, all the freshers are arriving. There's such an energy on campus. And I think that is the starting point of great startups, is the energy, it's people bouncing ideas off each other. Like that kind of creates the context for it. I mean, you were with a load of researchers just today in the ORC. Like what's your experience with them?
Yeah, I think something that I was talking to them about is our trip to San Francisco, and trying to help them understand why we'd want to go out to the US and see what happens in Silicon Valley. And something I said to them is really the process is very similar, but it's all about the mindset. And people here, and actually had researchers kind of saying the same thing. It's like, why would you bother doing that? Seems like a lot of effort. And over there, it's just like, why wouldn't you do that? Because you could potentially do something that's completely exciting and epic and have huge impact and change the world. So it's all about how you think and see everything.
And we see that time and time again, don't we? We've got these brilliantly talented engineers and scientists who are in labs across campus doing incredible things, and yet often understated, just not thinking of themselves as special. Because it's normal here, right? That this place is just crammed full of people doing exceptional things. So that becomes normal. But then when you expose them to the kind of world of opportunity that's out there, suddenly they realize, oh, wow, this really is impressive. Investors are blown away by what I can do. There is an opportunity to launch something. And like you say, take people out to Silicon Valley, suddenly that mindset they're exposed to is totally different.
I think as well they can feel a bit out of their depth because they can be professors, experts in their field when it comes to research, maybe silicon photonics, whatever it is. But actually when you start talking to them about like their business plan, like you've completely lost them and they don't know what's happening. And so I think having that sort of knowing that there's people here that can support them and help them with that side of the journey is what makes all the difference to them feeling confident that they could do it.
Yeah, we see it a lot, don't we? Because, of course, you've got people who have always been high achievers academically. Like, just to get here, they've got to have got good, great grades at A-level to be a student here. The researchers who have got a great track record in academia. And then you're asking them to step right out of their comfort zone and try something they've never done before, and they've got no idea where to start and whether they could succeed. And, of course, that's risky.
Yeah, I think that was the other thing was about, thinking that maybe it's not as secure. You've got a nice cushy job at uni, they pay your salary. And then all of a sudden you're presented with this very high risk, but I have a mortgage, I have kids. How do I just, think about changing my whole lifestyle? And that is a very daunting thought, especially if you've never done it, you don't know anyone that's done it. So I think there's real value in having the community and the network at Future Worlds where you can speak to previous founders and say, hey, you were a researcher last year and now you're CEO of your spin out. Like, how does that happen? And how have you found that whole transition?
And of course, like your own journey, you were attracted to do your PhD specifically because of the wider impact, the startup potential. Like what did that look like to you?
Yeah, I think I wanted to do research, but I thought I don't want to do research for the sake of it. I want to do something that's going to actually impact people's lives. And I know everyone says, oh, you want to make a difference, like a bit of a cliche, but it's actually really true. And I feel like that's why a lot of people go into it. So when I had the opportunity to do a PhD that was a lot more commercially minded and we were thinking about product development, that really appealed to me. And obviously there is a spin out that are currently still working on the tech that I was working on during my PhD. And I think that was kind of what led me into this job because I love research and I love thinking about all the things you could change the world. But I'd had enough of pipetting in the lab by myself. And so this was an amazing opportunity to help other researchers to facilitate them doing just incredible things.
And what surprised you about transitioning from research into being part of Future Worlds?
I don't think I was made for research. Research can be very lonely and isolating. And I think part of it is people get stuck in a little bubble. They're in their lab all day and maybe they only really speak to their research group. And you sometimes forget like what happens in the rest of the world. And I think people can lose their way around thinking like, what's the point in what I do every day? And because you just kind of do it, the cogs just turn and you don't always think about why. So I think coming here has made me feel passionate that I want to help other researchers understand like the bigger picture is so important for people to understand your research, but also to then back your research.
Yeah, and we saw it, didn't we, last year with taking the whole cohort out to San Francisco, and some of them, it was like their eyes just opening, and then coming back and saying, I'm just thinking so much bigger about what I'm working on. Like, I had this idea that was modest, relatively small. Now I can see there's global potential.
Yeah, I was just speaking to someone at lunch about this because he said, do you have anyone that does things like a service? So I was like software as a service? It was like, no, more like hardware as a service. So they build things, it's like fabrication. And I was like, wow, how could you think about scaling this up? What could you do in the future? Like, where are you going with this? You know, can we automate it? Can we think bigger? And I think like by the end of a 20-minute conversation, I'd hopefully inspired him to think that he could do more than just make a few things in the lab by himself, and that there would be potential for the future.
Yeah, and we see it time and time again across these labs that you've got these researchers that are so driven by trying to make a difference, and then often so frustrated that they can see technology sitting on a shelf that has been developed over years here from research, but for whatever reason hasn't been taken forward, hasn't been adopted, and they haven't found a route to getting it to market. And to make a difference to those people is hugely fulfilling, isn't it?
I think it's that sometimes, and especially like I know engineers can be really guilty of it, that you make something because it's cool and you're like, wow, I've got this cool tech and it does something. And you're like, wow, okay, very nice. But then it doesn't actually have an application. And so they kind of do it back to front, where I feel like, you know, you should be going out into the world. What does the world need? What are we lacking? And then you solve a problem, not doing it the wrong way around, which is like, I have a solution, but I haven't worked out what the problem is yet. And I think that's a mentality that kind of differs between in research and in like the startup world, because startups, you see a gap in the market for something. So you think, I can fix that, I can solve that, I can sell that. And it's just very different ways of thinking.
Yeah. And what do you see as kind of some of the common links between the people that we support, the ones that really push on, the ones that really take that step and transition from being a student or being a researcher and becoming a startup founder? What are some of the things that they've got in common?
Yeah, I think it's that. I mean, someone asked me what the biggest hurdle was earlier, and I actually said starting. And so I think one of the qualities that we see in people is this just taking a little bit of a risk and stepping out of your comfort zone. So it's a little bit of maybe bravery, stupidity, I don't know, whichever. But then after that, it's determination and it's that staying power, because it's not easy and it is a lot of hard work. But I think the key thing is if you're doing something that you're really passionate about and you truly believe in it, that is enough to kind of motivate you through the process, even though it has ups and downs and it's not a good day every day. If you're doing something that you believe is making a difference, that's all you need to kind of get you through.
Yeah.
We had our first TLDR live event of the new academic year on Thursday, so that was always very exciting. So I was hosting and I saw that there were loads of questions that we didn't actually get time for, which is a bit of a shame. So I wondered if you wanted to have a little look at them now.
Sounds like a good idea. Great job hosting, and obviously the way that we do the double act on the questions, I could see all of them like flying through. There was so many. So yeah, that'd be great.
But they're super fun. So let's have a little look. So one that I think this always comes up is a really popular question is like, what's like top tips for people that are thinking about a startup or like future entrepreneurs?
For me, I love it, and it's a bit cliche, but I love this statement around that the biggest cause of startup failure is failure to start. So the biggest tip that you can have if you're thinking about launching a startup is, well, start, do something, take some steps. You never know where it may go. Yeah,
such a good. But do you not think it's like people get really scared of failing and there's like a big stigma around like if I do something and I fail, you know, then I'm less worthy, or it might put them off doing it again in the future?
I think it is a particular challenge of the mindset in the UK side, particularly where we have this kind of skepticism, it's probably not going to work, and almost this delight in knocking people down when things aren't working. But I think it's so important, and I think it resonates in an academic and research context, to not see it as success or failure, but to see it as experimentation. And looking at a startup as an experiment. So then saying, great, I've got this hypothesis. I think this could work. What tests can I run to test that hypothesis? And so then it's not about success or failure. It is around running a good experiment, getting some results. And the results may not be what you wanted, but you've got good data. And then you learn from that and then you change.
Yeah, surely to get told early on that nobody likes your idea is much better than finding out later on.
Absolutely.
When you thought it was a good idea.
One of the biggest wastes in the startup ecosystem is talented people working on mediocre ideas. And it's much better to cycle through ideas until you've got evidence to show this is a great idea. Now let's double down and really make that work, rather than spending potentially years of your life working away on something that's just not great.
Yeah, never going to go anywhere. So another question for you. So this is kind of an interesting one. So if you have an idea that focuses on SMEs, so like small to medium enterprises, which have like quite limited resources, and I think a similar thing could be said for people targeting like research at universities because they don't have too much money. How can you get enough funding, for your products, and where do you get that from?
It's a real challenge. It's a perennial challenge. So the carrot that you have on selling to SMEs is it's often relatively straightforward to get your first few customers. You can make contact with them quickly. They make decisions quite quickly, which is great. And I've been there in at least one of my startups. It was a SaaS product, and early on we were selling to SMEs particularly. And we had a lot of SMEs we were selling to, but all of them a relatively small number of licenses. So the deal sizes were relatively small. When it comes to trying to raise investment for that, most investors aren't interested, and there's a really good reason for that, because it's really difficult to scale if your customer size is relatively small. You need to be getting bigger deal sizes to scale quickly, and that invariably means you need to have bigger customers if it's on the B2B side. And so the reality is, rather than just trying to crack how do I raise money for a product for SMEs, actually looking at, is there a product in here that could work for larger companies? Is there a way that I could increase that deal size to help me to scale more effectively? Because that would then unlock the potential for investment. If genuinely your passion is for a product for SMEs, okay, great. Either you're probably going to have to bootstrap it because investors aren't going to be wanting to fund it, which is fine. Or you're going to have to find a really slick way of automating that process so that it's entirely self-service and you can be super efficient in how you process those SME clients to, again, make it scalable without big costs.
So if you're doing that, and so perhaps you're not going to take like investment from a big firm straight away, like in your bootstrapping, as you said, so like, what does that really mean? Like, how am I going to live and pay my bills?
So yeah, that's a challenge. And bootstrapping is, the term bootstrapping means you're launching a startup without taking external investment. And so, I mean, there's only limited ways that you can do that. Either you start with a lot of money and then you invest your own money. Great. That's still bootstrapping, but it's a very privileged form of bootstrapping. Most people, if you're bootstrapping, you've either got to get customers really quickly and find ways of getting customers to pay you upfront in cash for something that's either very modest or maybe doesn't exist yet. So some people are great at selling something that doesn't yet exist. So if you can do that, brilliant. Otherwise, often the reality is you're going to have to get a job, or you're going to have to find some other form of income to support you so you can still eat while you're building your product, while you're earning your first customers.
So I suppose if you're in that position, then you're like obviously very desperate to find customers because, your money's running out. Like, how do you go about finding them? Like, what's the best way to find, like if you say you're working with small enterprises maybe, but then you think, actually, I want bigger companies, like, how do I find bigger companies? They're quite elusive, some of these larger companies. You can't necessarily just Google, an email address. So like, what do I do?
So there's a whole range of things you can do there. And there's books and web pages just proliferating around ways that you can get into customers. So I just don't accept that as an excuse. There is loads of things that you can do to get out there. So the first thing is you've got to start. You've got to try. Too many people think it's inaccessible, and so then they just hold themselves back. That's never going to work. It may not work if you try a load of things, but it's definitely not going to work if you don't try. So you can Google email addresses. There's a load of email addresses that you can find online. You can find email addresses for other people at the same company, and so often large companies follow exactly the same email format. So then you just change the name, same format, and try. You'll get a bounce back if it doesn't work, and 9 times out of 10, it probably will work. You can use the phone. You can go old school and just ring up the company and try and get through to people. And there's different tactics you can use to try and get past the gatekeeper. You can use LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn, it didn't exist when I was doing the first startup. It is such an incredible resource for identifying people, and you can be so specific in the target that you have. So this particular job role in this type of company, and start using that to build out your network. And going to events is another great thing. Go to conferences, go to trade shows, go to any place where the kind of people you're trying to interact with are going to be there. Look for when your target customer is speaking on a panel. Turn up at the panel, ask questions, go and speak to them afterwards. There's a whole load of different ways that you can get hold of people. And if you're still struggling on that, a great tip would be set up your own event. If the right event doesn't exist, then set your own event up and use that event as the reason that you're then trying to talk to the people that you're trying to sell to, and try and bring those to your event that you're coordinating. It's amazing how many people will be willing to just talk at an event because they're passionate about this particular topic. And if the thing that you're selling or the thing that you're imagining, perhaps you haven't even built it yet, is something that really does scratch an itch that they're really passionate about, then you will be able to get some momentum. And ultimately, if you're not, and if no one's interested, that is the biggest clue ever that the thing you've got is perhaps not a great idea, and use that as evidence to say, let's find something different.
So I know a lot of people were building perhaps like hardware. It's probably the best example where that's really expensive, really time consuming. So if I want to go to customers and say, you know, do you like my hardware? Are you going to pay me money for it? How can I do that if I haven't actually got the money to build it yet? Like, what can I do to be enticing people, to tell them as much as I possibly can? But yeah, without actually having it.
Yeah, so like Rob Fitzpatrick with his book, The Mom Test, is great on this area around how do you ask questions to get evidence to work out whether your idea is good or bad, because everyone lies to you. His basic premise is everyone's going to lie to you. No one wants to tell you that your baby's ugly. So if you just go and say, look at my baby, isn't it beautiful? They're going to say, oh yeah, it's nice, those 3 heads. So you've got to find other ways of asking good questions. And if it's a hardware product, there's just great ways that you can work out if this is going to address a real need, and finding problems that people are really passionate about is the best starting point, because then you can optimize a solution that really does address that problem, and finding ways of asking people about those problems rather than leaping straight to, here's my solution, do you think it's a good solution? That's a really bad way of getting evidence, because everyone will tell you, oh yeah, it's a really good idea, yeah, you should try that. And when you spent all your money, you spent all your time, and nothing's working, maybe you'll have learned that perhaps it wasn't such a good idea in the first place.
So we had a lot of people asking about investment, but you know, it's really hard to find an investor that is going to bring everything that you need to the table. Like Kumi was talking about, it's more than just money. But so what are some of the red flags as a founder when you're looking for an investor?
There are, I mean, it's such a challenging environment, but there's loads of red flags. The first one would be gut feel, like trust your gut. If you meet someone and you instinctively do not trust them, or you're just feeling uneasy about them, do not take investment from them. And it's really difficult, particularly as a first-time founder. As you say, it's really difficult to find investors who would want to invest. And so the temptation is, anyone who's offering me money, I've got to take it. Yeah. But it is a route to failure. It is a route to stress and heartache and losing your hair, having the wrong shareholders in your company, because it sends you so far off course. So the first one, trust your gut. If instinctively you don't trust them, steer clear. Valuation is one. So if you're a million miles apart on valuation, then that's a red flag. It may be a red flag on you that you're overly optimistic, you're just misaligned on what's a realistic expectation. It may be a red flag on them that they are just not getting what you're doing. They're not understanding what the route could be. Another red flag would be, have they made other investments? Now, it's really difficult. Everyone's got to start somewhere, but you do not want your lead angel investor to be someone who's not invested in early stage, high tech, high risk startups before, because the reality is they are early stage. Most of them don't work, and that is painful for the investors. You need investors who understand that journey. You're looking for an investor who's been on that journey before and can help you to navigate that based on their experience of working with other founders like you, trying to do what you're trying to do. So people who don't have the experience, look at the things that they can do to help you. there's this phrase that, all money is not fungible, meaning that, money from one place is not the same as money from somewhere else. You're looking for intelligent investors. You're looking for well-connected investors, experienced investors who are going to bring more than just money. So asking them the questions of what else they can bring to you, see what introductions they can make before they put the money in, see if they're really willing to commit to you, if they're really willing to try and plug you into other people. It's essentially like trying before you buy. So before you've done that transaction, test how that interaction works. And if they're not willing to do that, that's then a red flag that they're not really buying into supporting you. They're trying to hold their cards close to their chest, which kind of means they're offering you everything, but they're not demonstrating anything until you've taken their money, and then it's too late if it doesn't work out.
So obviously it was amazing to have so many people from the university in the audience the other night. And I think something that lots of people want to know is that although university is very exciting, great opportunities are there, I suppose there can be some challenges of trying to launch a startup or spin out from the university. So what are some of those that people experience?
And there's a lot of challenges. That's absolutely right. So one of the things I say is, and it's again a cliched expression, is you're the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. The reality is the biggest challenge is your own mindset and whether you are willing to take the risks, whether you're willing to really commit to a journey that may or may not work. And within a university context, you're surrounded by very bright people who are very influential, who have perhaps invested a lot of time in you, perhaps your supervisors, others around the research group, or if you're a student, maybe your lecturers, who are committed to an academic lifestyle. They're not committed to going down the startup route. They are perhaps risk averse and maybe very skeptical. And academia is built on skepticism and criticism and challenge and deconstructing ideas. And all of those things can mitigate against the individual who's trying to do something different outside of academia, who's trying to launch a startup, who's trying to take these big risks. And so first and foremost, I think there is that cultural mindset that can be an inhibitor. And the most important thing I think you can do in that context is reach out to other people who share that startup mindset, who are bold innovators, people who are willing to pioneer, people who have taken risks. It may or may not have been a startup, but ideally other people who have launched startups, people who are in that startup ecosystem. You need to plug into that straight away. So I'd say that would be like the headline risk. But what about you? What do you think are some of the challenges that you see within the university?
So I think something that lots of people ask about as well, and I think we definitely saw it when we were out in San Francisco, was people asking about like university equity stakes in startups. And I think in the US especially, they have a very different way of viewing this. And I think theirs is more around a payback. So lots of the universities don't take equity necessarily, but when the startups are very successful later on, they tend to like make nice contributions back to the university's new buildings and things like that. Whereas here, I think it can be something that is quite, it's like a very touchy subject. And I think for investors as well, something that they want to ask, but because they want to know how it's going to affect their share in the company. So that's something I get asked about a lot. And obviously at Future Worlds, we don't really have control over that per se. But you have written an article recently with your opinion on the matter. Do you want to tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been very open that we would align much more closely with the Silicon Valley type model, that we always advocate for universities taking a lower equity percentage, being more liberal with how we support that. And I fully understand the arguments internally around some of the resource constraints within universities, but fundamentally believe that a startup at the beginning, when it's spinning out from a university, is really barely an idea at that point. All of the work is still to be done. It's like 1% is that idea, then 99% is the execution. And so as institutions, we need to be coming behind startup founders, spin out founders, to give them all the help they can get. Because the long-term outcome is for the good of humanity. It's for making the world better. All of the aspirational reasons that a university exists are all good reasons to support spin-outs. And it is such a difficult journey. We need to remove as many barriers as possible. And where equity stakes and licensing terms inhibit investors coming in and investing, I think that can be a real challenge. And so, of course, we advocate for that. It's a complex issue, and of course we're working internally and externally to try and see how that can move forward. But within that, there's the other challenge, and I think it lies behind the equity thing, which is as a startup, you have to be razor focused on solving this particular problem. You're hugely driven by this particular agenda. Within a university, I mean, here we've got over 25,000 students, 5,000 members of staff, doing a myriad of different things. So as an institution, your spin out, your startup is not the most important thing. It's the most important thing to you, but it's not to the institution. It may not be the most important thing to your research group, to the supervisors you're working with, the school that you're in. And that can be one of the real challenges, is you're having to find a way through competing priorities, competing demands on space and time and funding. And where those priorities come in, sometimes sadly, that can make it much more difficult, particularly for PhD students and junior researchers, who are often the ones who have really got the vision for how this could transform this particular area. They're often the ones who are willing to take the risk and commit their life and their career to this venture, but getting their senior colleagues on board with that can be an inhibitor. And it's one of the things that I think we together take great satisfaction on within Future Worlds, is when you see that coming together and when you see it working, and when we're able to advocate for those people and help to nurture that through. But it's also deeply frustrating when we're working with people and you can see the potential, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't line up internally. And that's a real shame.
Yeah, somebody did ask me the other day, actually, like, what do you do when you're either like a PhD student or an early career researcher and your, say, supervisor like has no commercial interest whatsoever? Because, you know, they are, like you say, they're in control. You don't really have much autonomy as a PhD student or as an early career researcher to kind of just choose that you want to spin out from the university, for instance. So I think it can be really challenging. But as you say, there are lots of people, and hopefully as the community that interact with Future Worlds around the university grows, there'll be lots of senior academics to demonstrate where it can work, and hopefully that will convince some of the others that are a little bit more skeptical that this is a possibility.
Absolutely. There's a real hearts and minds momentum, and we see it happening, that as someone in a particular group or a particular module or a particular course is successful, goes on this journey, so other people around them look at them and think, oh, well, if that person could do it, I could do it. Or if this is working for them, okay, maybe we should try it in this group. Maybe we should also try and do the same thing. And we've seen that in different schools and different areas, that success has then bred success. And it definitely builds this momentum. I think it's also really important to remember that you're not alone. And although it can feel very lonely at times, and if you're the only one in your research group that's really trying to pursue that, then it's back to this kind of the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, that you then think you're the odd one, everyone else is normal, you're the freak, and so then you can sort of explain it away to yourself, and you end up dropping it. But as you look around the university, whether it's Future Worlds, whether it's other people around the university, if you're in a different institution, there will be other people that do get it. And looking for allies is so important. So sometimes people can't directly help you, but they can be an ally. Whether that's just moral support and encouragement, whether that's sort of the pastoral help of mopping your brow and wiping up tears when it's really difficult. Yeah. But sometimes allies can provide direct input and maybe challenge the status quo, or advocate for you on your behalf for why this is important. And we've seen it with other PhD students or junior researchers that didn't have the support in their area. And whether it's us or other people coming around them, gave them that critical support, and it did make the difference. And then once they started succeeding, everyone wants to be their friend. Everyone wants to say, oh, of course, yes, we were helping them from the very start. And fine, you dust yourself off on that one. But looking for allies is critical.
And so it says that sense of community as well, with going through some of like the accelerator programs like the Future Worlds cohort, is that you're all in it together. So although you're all working on your own startups and you might be a sole founder, you can still feel part of something a little bit bigger. And it's turning to those people and saying, oh, this bad thing happened to me, can you help? And someone that's maybe gone through it before and be like, yep, same thing happened to me, don't worry, I can help you try and, you know, problem solve. So I think there's like a big like value in having that community feel and a network, and like it's a support network and a safety net a little bit.
Yeah. And of course, you saw it when we were in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, with all of the founders helping each other with their pitch, didn't we? Like, you walked in on that room and they're all there pitching to each other and have been there for, I don't know how long, hours.
Yeah, I was really surprised actually at that you felt like we would have to sort of tell them or encourage them to be like, oh guys, you should be practicing your pitches, but like we didn't say anything. They'd just run off and we're already doing it together. And I think it is that kind of giving each other encouragement as well, which is just really so nice to see. And it was really heartwarming because, you know, you take a group of random people from the university, so all different departments, different ages, different academic statuses. You've got professors and their undergrad students in the same place, so you think, I'm not sure how the dynamic's going to work, but actually it was amazing and everyone got on so well, and it just makes you feel like it's just sensational community there.
And we often get that feedback, don't we, from the cohort, that actually the most valuable thing was the community of other founders, and that those people going through the same journey, supporting each other, made such a difference to them in terms of resilience, mindset, approach, just encouragement in the tough times, as well as the network of connections, the investors, the expertise that we bring. But that community makes such a difference. And what have you seen through Future Worlds in terms of the kind of progression of people? So we've worked with loads of students and researchers, starting with just an idea, kind of any stories maybe that have surprised you of how well people have advanced?
I don't know if I should name names, but I think some of the people that were on the cohort this year, so there was someone who's like a researcher at the university, and they were very typical research. You know, they're very focused on doing their lab work, and that's a huge priority to them, of course, but had no idea about any business things at all, where to begin or what to even, be thinking about. And at the beginning, we're trying to get people to practice their pitches, or even to come up with a pitch, to have an idea of a pitch. And they were, really awful at the beginning, and people are really, really struggling to communicate their ideas in a coherent way, unless you're an expert in that field. You're like, no one's going to know what you're talking about. But then you see them go on this journey, and there's a lot of practicing and fumbling and kind of goes on. But to see those people that were at the beginning, you just think, oh my goodness, how are we ever going to get you ready to pitch? And then you see them on demo day pitching to a room of like 300 people, and doing absolutely incredible pitches. And you feel like so proud. You're like, oh, like they're your little babies. But it's incredible to see in a short time as well, like 6 months, people can completely kind of overhaul their self-confidence and their belief in what they're doing, which just makes all the difference.
So great. We've been answering loads of questions, but I'm sure people will still have some more. So what should people do if they've still got questions?
So if you've got any comments or questions for Future Worlds, please put them in the comment section below, or contact us on any of our social media. Drop us an email from the website. If you're a member of staff or a student at the university, pop in and see us and say hi. Anyone else you'd like to hear from, Ben?
Yeah, it'd be great if you're an investor, mentor, advisor, maybe a corporate partner. There's loads of ways of engaging with what are, frankly, some of the best startups in the UK.
We look forward to hearing from you.